in St. Philip's has a long history of Newfoundland culture. It has a history of folklore, fairies, ghost stories, and an unexplained event called the Bell Island Boom.
Well, the Bell Island Boom is, depending on who you're talking to, there are different stories about the Bell Island Boom. The official story that came out, I think, was about ball lightning. That's why it actually hit up in Lance Cove. But the residents will tell you a completely different story. Jim Farrell, who was the fire marshal in for the province, I spoke with Jim several times. I was down in Lab City. I actually left Bell Island that day the boom happened. And my mother called me. I called my mother out in Gander, and she started to tell me about it. And it was crazy. It was between 11 and 12 on a nice sunny morning. So where did the ball lightning come from? There was the neighbors that saw it. They were Beckfords, and the young girl who witnessed it, really looking through her screen door, she described it. She said they heard a whirring sound, and it got louder and louder until it was almost unbearable. The fuses, the screw-in fuses, they unscrewed. They had two 30-amp fuses, an old type fuse box you pull down, and the fuses unscrewed and stuck into the wall 30 feet away as the sound got louder. Went stuck actually into the wall. There's pictures of it to show it. And all the outlets, there was no wire left inside the casings of the wire. Nothing, no residue, no nothing. She said, she describes it as everything went red. Outside it was like a red dust. But it lasted for a couple of minutes, and when that stopped, there was nothing. There was no residue, there was nothing like that. It blew apart a shed. It didn't harm the horse that was in there. So they killed a couple of hens and a couple of rats that were hanging around, but it didn't harm the horse in any way. Back just behind their house in the woods, and Jim Farrell told me this part of it, there were 3 holes into the ground. There was no dirt, no grass, no nothing, no burnt marks, and they went about 4 feet deep. There was nothing. It's like you went and stamped a big hole in the ground. There was 3 of them, and they were perfect. And that was supposed to be ball lightning.
Wow.
Now, there was also a young guy coming down, about 14 years old, riding his paddle bike. He had on a belt with a silver buckle. The silver buckle disintegrated. It was gone. It was just gone, right? Shattered windows for about 200-300 feet in every direction up in Lance Cove. And the boom was, as my mother said, we lived just over there, by the way, just over there in the last house. And Lance Cove is at the furthest end of Southern Island, southern part down where this happened. And they actually heard it and felt it down under Scotia number 1. Wow. So that was, to me, that was incredible. And within a half an hour, everybody showed up. The RCMP showed up. According to witnesses, they say the guy showed up from Los Alamos, Texas. They took something from the woods, like in those big, well, we haven't seen them here, big metal crate and big metal jugs that look like you carried milk in. There were several of them taken away. They had to sign statements, or they did sign statements saying that there was ball lightning. They said, this is our official story. So that was the official story. And in the house that actually hit, the roof was actually shifted, so I'm told. And the 2x4 inside was actually twisted. I don't know what, nobody knows what it was, how it happened, but I can tell you that ball lightning doesn't float with me at all. That's not even sensible, right? As the young girl says, now she's a little younger than I am, and she says that when they thought it was the end of the world, that's what they thought up there. You go in the screen door, nice day, and you can't see anything but red. I mean, you couldn't see a foot outside your door as the noise, like a whirring sound that was almost hard on the ears. Everybody was just petrified. And as quick as it came, it went. There's the rumors, everything went from, because that time was the Star Wars initiative that the Soviets and the Americans were at. A lot of people thought it might have been some kind of laser that they were setting and set it off, and it just went not where it's supposed to go. And other people thought it was actually alien activity, because nobody was allowed in the woods till it was all cleaned up, right? And you couldn't get near there. I mean, there was helicopters and police here in no time. The whole thing was cordoned off. And windows shattered 200 or 300 feet. It was like something had landed, right? And as it landed, whatever was there was gone. And that's what people believe. Not the ball lightning story. They believe in either it was some kind of laser technology, weapon, or, and for those who believe in, you know, really out there, they believe that something hit, and for a while they're trying to tell us it was a meteor. And you don't have 3 meteors in one pop. And this thing, whatever it was, hit the house, or came through the house, burnt, and it was what got me, because I saw the wire. I couldn't believe it. It was copper wire with shielding. It was, you know, up-to-date copper wire, but there was nothing in it. There was no residue. There was no burnt marks. It was just gone. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. When he showed me this, it was just gone, right? And then I saw the pictures of the imprint of 2 fuses a good 20 feet away, from one end of the hallway to the end of the other. They were just planted in there. That'd take some force, right, to unscrew right out of that. And the box wasn't damaged, right? It just, and the young girl who said, because she was so frightened, she started to run to her room, and she just, and then they took off, right? So this is what they actually saw. I wish I had seen it, right? Because it made a great story. But it went on. I mean, you know, there was, the big thing was ball lightning. I don't believe that for a second. No way, you can't get that on a nice sunny day. And then the other thing was like the belt buckle had gone. He got such a fright, he went into the ditch, didn't hurt himself, but the silver on his belt buckle disappeared. And there was a man coming out of the woods with a load of wood. One side of his face was all red, the other side was not hurt at all. All they did was put out the story that after intensive investigation that it was ball lightning. It was a natural phenomenon. And I don't think there's anybody on Bell Island believes that. I know I don't. Yeah, if you could get on the land, because land is private. If it wasn't private property, I think that would be one hell of a tourist attraction. I mean, the people who live in that house still live there. Well, the parents are long gone, but they still live there. And it's just up behind their house now. It's all grown over after a while, all grown over. You know, there's nothing left except, I'm not going to say the memories, but it did hit the news big time. And, you know, you're not getting any officials to say any more what they said back then. That's it. That's one of the mysteries here. And, you know, I love going into folklore and stuff like that, and that doesn't fall into that category at all. And people came up and say for a year or 2 or 3 afterwards, you know, getting information, but what they've got is what I've given you. Nobody seems to know what happened. Everything that could have been, say, physical evidence is gone. Windows were repaired. The young fellow was questioned. The guy who got sunburned, I'm going to say, it wasn't actually sunburned, like coated with red paint. The shed now was never rebuilt. The parents that were there at the time, they're gone. But again, a couple of, and these weren't like little kids. Like the young girl was, I think, 15 or 16 years old. She wasn't like, you know, she had enough sense to know what had happened. But everybody was totally petrified, and shattered windows from 300 and 400 feet away. I mean, that is just incredible. And it did. And my mother, like I said, my parents, everybody on Bell Island felt it. Whatever hit us hard. That's what it sounded like, a boom, and it was a really boom. But strangely enough, when the up in the landscape itself where it actually hit, there wasn't a whole lot of sound. It was just a whirring noise, like a high-pitched whirring noise that would break glass, that type of note, right? And it seemed to travel through the wires, and it took out the shed, destroyed the shed, flattened the shed, but there was a horse in it. It didn't harm the horse, but it killed the chickens and the rats that were there. It took out all the copper, twisted 2x4. You know, if something going to twist a piece of 2x4, I mean, that's an awful smack. Right? And it didn't damage the outside or inside walls, just twisted the 2x4.
Crazy.
The whole thing was crazy. That's what I'm saying. There was laser, microwave, because that's when the Star Wars initiative was going on with the Russians and the Americans. And you don't know what crazy weapon could have came out of that. But I mean, it really, like, it was a boom down here. It was a whirring noise up there in the house, and it did a lot of damage. And worse than that, it frightened the hell out of people, because, you know, if it's a boom, something will blow up. This was no blow up. There was, when the people had enough nerve to go out, just maybe 30 feet behind the house, there was just 3 holes.
Wild.
Right, and they weren't even allowed to go near it. I mean, just the Mounties, everybody was there. No amount of time now, in a very small amount of time, And the thing was, as the fire marshal at the time told me, there's a group who were eyewitnesses, all went down to Los Alamos, Texas, and they were debriefed on what it was. I think it was part of it. You know, something was happening. They knew this had gotten away from them, and they had a fair idea where it was going. The Mounties were there first. They cordoned off the area, and according to some of the residents, the Mounties were there in full force, and the helicopters were there in no time. So somebody knew something had gotten away, and they certainly knew it wasn't ball lightning because it hits the gun. I mean, if a lightning bolt hits a house, you're flattening that house. You're going to burn it to the ground, right? It couldn't be that. No way.
Will we ever know what happened in the Bell Island boom? Maybe not. But this next story is about Anne Harvey and her amazing bravery.
I became involved with the story of Anne Harvey through YAFL, which is set up through MUN. I'm a professor there. And YAFL connects academics with people in the community. So a fellow named Blanford Billard from Isle of Mort had seen the play Anne and Seamus, which is an opera that tells the story of Anne Harvey. It's a fictionalized account as well. And so he'd seen it, but it's quite a massive production. And he was wondering if it was possible to write a play, a smaller version, that could then be performed in Isle of Mort. And the two of us got connected up through YAFL. I was aware of the Anne Harvey story prior to Blanford getting in touch with me because I'd seen Gillian Kiley's production of Anne and Seamus at the Reed Theatre at MUN. You know, first of all, we were trying to promote the idea of a theatre festival where people would come and see the same play over and over again. So, you know, trying to link up Anne of Green Gables with Anne Harvey. But Anne is a well-known Newfoundland heroine. She and her family saved, I believe it was like 126 souls from the shipwreck of the Despatch. And you know, she's a young woman like Anne Harvey as well. So we just try to make that connection in people's minds so that they would, you know, make that connection that this is a story that was important, that is important. I'm not from Newfoundland originally, and so I'm you know, I always think I'm of here, but I'm also from away as well. And so I didn't feel comfortable writing this play from the perspective of a Newfoundlander. So a lot of the point of view is from that of the first mate on the ship. He's the one actually telling the story, and he tells Anne's story, and he brings us into it. So it's really from the same perspective that I came at it from. And but what happened with that is we also brought in the sea crossing of the Despatch, and we ended up with a love triangle. And the mermaids sort of had two parallel actions going on. One was that Anne lived on this small island, which I've visited a few times, off of Isle of Mort. So Isle of Mort is landlocked now, but the island is a very small island in the Atlantic. And so she lived there with basically her uncle's family as well. So it's a very small family. And so she, in the play, she dreams of falling in love with someone, and that someone turns out to be a merman, essentially. While at the same time, so she has her fantasy of, you know, someone coming ashore and loving her and all of these things she's not able to have on this really, really tiny island. But also in the play, it actually starts with the first mate coming home after being gone for many months and not being heard of for many months. And historically, the first mate and the captain were brothers, and the captain died in the sinking of the Despatch when he was trying to get to shore in a jolly boat. It was just actually swept over by a wave over the entire Despatch. So in order to ameliorate or soften that death, he comes up with this fantastical story about mermaids and following the ships, and about essentially, you know, the uncle not being dead to the first mate's children, but that he lives on as a sea creature. Harriman
Yeah.
is the other, well-noted hero of the play, and he's the big scruffy Newfoundland dog with the big webbed feet, the ability to swim in the North Atlantic. So so in the storytelling, he appears, and honestly don't remember if we had a physicalization of him on stage. I know we discussed it at some point. I later made a Harriman out of a giant lantern puppet for another play where Anne briefly appears. You can't really tell the story without the Newfoundland dog. Like a lot of history, there's not tons and tons known about Anne Harvey. There's some accounts by the relatives of the survivors. There is the Time that picked them up later, has a captain's log. There's stories that have been passed down from generation to generation within Isle of Mort. So I interviewed, the Historical Society and other people interested in that history. And there are lots of other accounts, but a lot of them are questionable. A lot of them have just the same information, or some of them have the wrong dates and things like that. So it's not like most of these things for this time period. There's not a lot, and some of it is a bit obscured as well. Like were the Harvey brothers, the father and his brother George and Tom, were they from the Jersey Isles in the UK? How did they travel to Isle of Mort? Who were they married to? Who were their wives? There's a lot of questions, really. So a lot of it was fictionalized, but I did work very, very, very closely with the community to ensure that it was still their story and that it was the story they wanted to tell. It was a different version because it was coming from the perspective of the first mate, which they hadn't really considered in the past. But and there's ship's logs as well, like manifests of who was on board and stuff, and on the dispatch. And so it was very important that I was telling a story that they wanted to be told and that they were proud of and that they owned. And they worked with me. And actually, one of the major concepts, the concept of the love triangle, actually came from a workshop from an actor we hired from the area. She was questioning why the captain didn't go down with the ship, why he was getting off of it on a jolly boat and was then killed. And I was like, why was the captain leaving the ship? Isn't he supposed to stay on board and be the last person off? So that became a major part of the fictionalized account. Hopefully you can see it again. We've done it, we've put it off twice. Last time 3 years ago, and the festival is called the Isle of Mort Theatre Festival, and I ran it for a number of years, and I'm still, although not part of it, I'm still closely associated with it in other ways. But Lynn Panting runs it now. She's been running it. She ran it for 1.5 years, and not including this year. And it is on hold for the COVID-19 at the moment. The play originally toured the province in its first manifestation. It played St. John's and Cupid's and Grand Bank and Clarenville and Port aux Basques and obviously Isle of Morton. That might be it, but there might have been 1 or 2 other locations. And so we hope that it'll, pop up again. It's still a growing festival, so we can't, although the idea was to show it every year, it just won't necessarily generate a big enough audience every year, so we have to change up the programming. And I directed the first version, and Kevin Woolridge directed it 3 years ago. In fact, it was on at this time 3 years ago because a picture just popped up in my Facebook memories.
This is a monument to Ethel Dickenson. Ethel Dickenson was born in St. John's and educated at Methodist College. After taking a domestic science course in Guelph, Ontario, Ethel Dickenson returned to St. John's to operate the Interdenominational Domestic Science School on Harvey Road. The school followed no religious creed, and neither did it confine itself to serving any particular class of students. Children from the poorer homes attended the school along with classmates from the homes of the rich. In 1915, while visiting England, Ethel began working as a volunteer nurse to wounded Newfoundland soldiers. 3 years later, she returned to the school, but in 1918, an outbreak of the Spanish flu forced the school to close. Ethel began caring for the sick at the emergency hospital established at King George V Institute on Water Street. Already in poor health, she contracted the Spanish flu and died that same year. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again. And remember, it happened here.
I grew up in Natty Bay, a little community 6 kilometers from here.
I grew up here.
In St. Lenaire. We met in 65 and we got married in April of 66. First when we got married, we were married 2 years before electricity came here. Oh, we didn't have no fridges or anything then to put things in. We always bottled our jam and we always put pear wax on top to keep it from spoiling. You know, that would keep it from going bad on top. And that's how we did the bottling of that then, you know, until electricity came through. Both of us worked on a fish plant. First when we got married, we used to fish, right? Money wasn't very plentiful. You know, we was only getting small pay at our work.
See, back here you lived off the land. That's all we lived off land. There wasn't, you didn't have any money because you didn't need it. See, there was no light bills, no phone bills, no cars. So you didn't need money.
And we had all those stuff, you know, all of those things preserved, right? When you come home from work and that, you know, instead of come home cooking a meal, which is days we didn't have time to do, we open up something, probably open up a bottle of mousse or thing and put it on the stove and add it up, make some gravy and boil a few potatoes and carrots and that, and there you ate your meal for supper. It was really important for the you know, for us family, right? Beets and the carrot and stuff like that, right? That all comes from our own garden.
We used to set potatoes, we'd kill up from the beach, and then when the capelin land, we'd put a capelin on top. That was the fertilizer we used there.
We gave a lot of our stuff away to people who didn't have things. We would share our bottling and our veggies. Say if someone came in unexpected and you was after finishing your lunch or whatever, we had hours to eat. Well, they came in, you open up a bottle of caribou or rabbit and, you know, whatever, right? Moose or whatever they desired. We just do it out in quick meal, you know? We're going to start off by making some beets. We got 5 pounds of beets. First, they got to be boiled, and we just go by the tenderness. And then when they're done enough, we'll throw them in the sink there, and we'll just run some cold water over them. And as soon as the cold water is up, as soon as they're cold to the touch, we'll just take with our finger and thumb and just peel the beets like that. And now sometimes if you don't cook them enough, they won't peel like that. And then I'll cut them up. Some people want them very fancy, but I don't do that. I just cut them up chunks. And after I get them cut up, I'll do the juices, I'll say. The way I does mine, I use is 2, 2, and 2. I use 2 vinegar, 2 sugar, and 2 water. That's cups. And I'll add allspice. That's what I put in mine, just allspice and salt. With the allspice, 2 teaspoons, and I'll taste it. If that's not enough, I'll add more. Right on. And then when we get that done, I'll bring it to a boil, and then I'll put the beets back in the pot, and I'll just let them come up to a boil, right? And then we'll put them in the bottle. They're sealed. If that's not sealed, that's going to spoil.
Oh, yeah.
Or see.
You got to make sure the bottle is sealed.
Yeah. Because when you're doing it like that, on the bottles, when they're put in red hot like that, the bottle goes down, the cover, lid will go down in the middle, right? And they'll click and it's down. But if that don't happen, the bottle's not sealed.
Might as well take them back.
We always leave it right there for a while. We know the lid don't go down. We'll open it up right away. See, we want to put it back. So I don't like bottle beets. I like my home. I like the ones that I do myself. Yeah.
There's a lot of beets, so.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.